And I should make a little correction, which is that I actually did Vital and Viable Town Centres back in 1985. But I think the framework is still as valid as ever. And I'm going to use it to run through a call for action, which is summarized in the article I've just done for the latest journal, which tries to show some practical things that could be done in all our town centres, and which I would like to think academicians might initiate. Apologies for publicising our latest report, which has literally just gone up on our website for the URBED Trust a couple of minutes ago. But you'll see that it's highly relevant, because if we are to deal with the tragedy or challenge of what's happening to our town centres, we're going to be very smart indeed. Next. So the first idea is that we need to get smart. We need to use all our knowledge if we're going to enable our town centres to recover. I believe the threat to our town centres is actually greater than the epidemic itself. The reasons being that I think many small enterprises will never reopen, the risks are too great, the costs are too high, the rewards too low. The big organizations have already finding that they can function through deliveries, they can function, make the most of the internet. So they're not going to invest, and most of the buildings are now owned by absentee managers. So we have the very things that we prize, the heart of our communities, could be dead in a very large number of places, or there'll be so much vacancy as to make it unappealing to go back into our streets when they reopen. So I think we need to treat it a bit like a war. In wars, you have strategies and you set up task forces. And it's worth remembering that in the Second World War, the Beveridge report was issued in 1942. In other words, we didn't wait till the end of the war before having a plan for recovery. I think we need to do something similar rather than doing the typical British thing of waiting to see all the results, setting up a commission or report, and by the time any thing is being considered, the patient has died. So what do we mean by getting smart? Well, the first thing is to look at the catchment area. This is London, a report we did for GLA. And by simply mapping the catchment areas, the pedestrian headshed around each of the town centres, focusing on those with transport links, we were able to highlight the immediate catchment areas, also to show the areas that have been developed more recently, which is the right-hand image. And we now have the strength of GIS, Geographical Information Systems, to be able to set priorities, because a huge range of data is available that can be superimposed and used to reach agreement much more quickly than we normally do. And this would include identifying disadvantaged areas where poorer people live and the areas which are most cut off, and then highlighting clusters. And I'll come back to that. But essentially, we have to build on strengths and find areas where we have a critical mass of activity to draw people in again. Next. So access is fundamental, and I love this cartoon. I'll read it. It says, left of the charity shop, past the charity shop, second right after the charity shop. And it makes the point that many of our town centres are becoming very similar. The term clone town was sometimes used, because they've lost all the bright lights, if you like, the things that draw people to stop. So I don't think that means just encouraging everyone to get in their cars and drive out of time. We actually have to prioritize active travel, walking and cycling. And of course, the very effects of this awful virus has been to encourage us to do the very opposite, to distance ourselves from other people. So we're learning behavior which is completely opposite to what's needed to cope with the coming climate or climate crisis which is already on us, which means not eliminating the cars, but taming cars, treating them a bit like wild beasts and making sure they keep their place and certainly don't dominate high streets. And that also applies to buses. We have to calm our buses and integrate public transport, which means being able to move easily from one mode to another, as you will able to do in continental cities and a few British ones. And perhaps the most radical thing of all is we have to charge for out-of-town parking, and we have to make parking within towns much easier and cheaper. So, for example, free after 3, as it is in the town where we live, which is Stroud. Next. The attractions are fundamental, but I'm suggesting that this is the order in which one does things. So you've got to make it easier to get in, but then we need to redevelop peripheral premises, a lot of failing retail parks and so on, and often some small underutilized car parks as homes. There's something absurd in people driving all the way around town to get somewhere to park. They should park in centers on the edge, quite possibly multi-story car parks, because those will be cheaper than going out of town. And we need to support workplaces and community hubs, which means taking over key empty buildings. And this is a classic example which we saw in Eindhoven. You remember that one ward, and we visited it for our conference, and a housing association took over the old Philips buildings and turned them into studios and housing. Now, Eindhoven had the misfortune of both Philips and DAP closing within a couple of weeks of each other. So it lost its main employers, but it's recovered its role as a center for design within the Netherlands. So it just shows what's possible if everyone works together. And by the way, the local authorities in Eindhoven collaborated with the adjoining towns and cities in what they call the triple helix. And I think that provides an inspiration for what we have to do in the next few years. Next. People won't just go in because there are shops or things to do. They want a town that feels special. We talk about the buzz. And that means not so much thinking about the whole town now, but thinking of special places within the town or on the edge of the town. So if we do the kind of mapping I'm proposing, we would be identifying clusters of shops and waterfronts, the canal where perhaps they're just dead dogs or whatever, but can be come back to life as an attractive place to visit in many, many towns, as is starting to happen in Stroud. Festivals and campaigns are obvious ways of celebrating places which might have been forgotten. And the article, when it appears in the journal, will show Morris dancers in Stroud. You can hardly move from Morris dancers many Saturdays in the year in Stroud. Environmental upgrades, of course, but let us not think that just putting lipstick on a gorilla or on a corpse will bring it back to life. We have to do something more fundamental. What I'm showing, this image shows Nyhavn, which is at the end of the mile of pedestrianized streets, which Jan Gehl introduced into Copenhagen. And it's a wonderful place to live to eat and drink outside the harbor. And my suggestion, as we won't be able to get enough people into our restaurants and cafes to make them viable if they've all got to be a long way apart, is of course we have to use the space outside. We have to use the pavements. And where the pavements are narrow, we have to put people back in the streets. So in other words, we have to reclaim the streets, for example, by using cones or tape initially, and then doing a more fundamental job afterwards. You'll see I'm an exponent of just do it, which is Wolf Daeseking's great phrase from Freiburg. So sometimes we need to just experiment and then see whether they work, rather than have very long drawn out studies. And all this is about reigniting civic pride. It's making people feel proud of where they live and where they shop and where they work. And that wasn't very strong even before the epidemic, but maybe the very process of seeing that we do belong to the same nation will mean that we can also do the same with regard to our town centers. Next. Finally, and most importantly, and I hope I haven't used up all my 10 minutes yet, who's keeping an eye on it? Stephen?
We are keeping an eye. It's okay, Nick.
Okay. Well, the final and most fundamental thing is organizing and resourcing initiatives. And I'm afraid we're very good at doing studies and measuring things and providing evidence, and not very good at actually making things happen. And that means re-empowering local authorities and partnerships. And they need money. So that means we have to recast parking charges. There's no good expecting to get the same income out of parking when parking often needs to be free or reduced, short-term parking free, which means we've got to change our property tax system. Those of you who are nerds like myself, economists, will perhaps have taken an interest in the idea of land value capture, which I've written quite a lot on as a pamphlet we can get hold of on sharing the benefit of land value uplift. But that also means not just getting money from developers, but it means getting existing property owners to pay more, particularly the wealthy residents who live around our towns, in villages and so on. So we've got to bite the bullet and accept that more money is going to be needed that can come from central government, and we have to raise that locally. And that means rethinking what town centres are for, so that we see them not just as places to shop and disposable, if you like, but places that are actually the heart of our communities and our commonwealth. And you could see this in Eindhoven, and this is, of course, the group from Eindhoven visiting it and enjoying it, what makes it special. So we need partnerships, of course, and above all, a lot of pilot projects. Some won't work, but let's at least try things out. And then share the lessons. Let's monitor them through beacon councils. This was the term used for councils that sought to show the way forward. And we did a report for them, oh God, back in 2000, I think. So enough is known. In my article, I referred to many reports we've done, but I could have referred to hundreds more. In fact, you need a tool shed for all the toolkits. So finally, let's once again with the slide that I introduced it, I think, no? Yes, smart cities. So let us capitalize on the digital revolution. Let's not see it defeat us where all our goods and services are supplied online, but let's see the value of human contact, because the really smart city is the city that's fun to be in. And this is where urbanists could play a leading role in taking part in task forces or getting task forces going. I've already been trying to get these ideas shared through historic towns and in Oxford, where I've been working. And I do hope it will be taken up much more widely, and that the academicians might be the people who lead the assault. And let's hope they return to tell the tale. Thank you.
Thank you.